Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazarov Chess channel and welcome to the TCEC Season 19 Premier Division. So I really don't want to waste your time. I've praised now Stockfish many times. I've said that it's the best engine. It will probably win this TCEC Season 19. It will probably run for president in the next US elections. I'm just kidding, but what surprised me now about the Stockfish engine that evaluating the position, so the first move f5 by black already as an inaccuracy. So in the game the Dutch defense was played by fire with the black pieces, and it already evaluated the first move f5 as an inaccuracy. So it's basically like saying, play the Dutch and I'm going to crush you. So it's really incredible how Stockfish is maybe suggesting us that we should really avoid to play the Dutch defense. And in this game that I wanted to show you today, it's really incredible how Stockfish performed, and I really let the engine work. I really didn't find so good lines for black to proceed here, and be prepared again. A positional brutal game played by Stockfish with great attacking formations, and this is really this Alpha Zero style in chess. Really incredible performance by this new Stockfish NNUE. So let's check out now the game. So round one, and it's usually fight. So d4. So we have already, as said, Stockfish evaluates the f5 move as an inaccuracy immediately. So let's see how Stockfish will handle the Dutch. So c4, knight to f6, knight to c3, d6, g3, c6, and now knight to f3. So far we have a little bit of a Leningrad setup, because most of the times, at least for me, there are two setups of blacks to play the Dutch defense. First of all, there is the Stonewall setup when black builds the really the Stonewall or light squares with the move d5, e6 to see. But this is a more flexible setup by black, and most of the times in these types of setups you see that black will develop the bishop on g7, is playing sort of a fianchetto. So knight to f3, still common theory. Here we have g6, we have bishop to g2, and now bishop to g7. Castling. So far this game has been prearranged. And now after the move d5, this was now the last move that the engines had to play. Now from this point on, the engines had to calculate this position for themselves. So there is also this line. This wasn't played in the game, so as I said, bishop to d7 was prearranged. But for those who have troubles maybe to play against the setups of blacks, there is really a tricky line. If your opponent, for instance, plays the move e5, of course you don't want to leave this pawn structure in the center like this, because black has made sort of an improved King's Indian setup. Let's flip the board a little bit. You see black has expanded already on the king side. As I said, this wasn't played in the game, but I really wanted to show you a great line. So after the move e5, you see it's already an improved version of the King's Indian now, with potential f4, e4 moves, and really a great expansion. But if that happens to you, you should take en passant. D takes e6, and now you could have troubles after the move bishop to e6. And in my preparation, I prepared against the FIDE master, managed to get a draw against a much better opponent. Here, after the move bishop to e6, there is this good line to play the move b3, because it seems now that knight to e4 traps a piece, or you get the rook here on a1, but you should simply here proceed with knight takes e4. After potential bishop to a1, you can take the pawn on d6, or you could even play knight from f to g5 or knight from e to g5, attacking the bishop with a direct attack on the bishop, and also threatening the fork on the rook and the queen. So, but the best way probably here is to proceed knight to d6, and now I see the bishop has to retreat. We can also grab this pawn. It's a complicated game, but the evaluation here is much better for white. We can maneuver our knight maybe to c5. If we get challenged, we can move the knight here on a5, still with opportunity to open the light square diagonal, and a great activity with also this dark square bishop. Although black is up the exchange sort of, but this bishop on f6 is not doing anything anymore in the game. It's just aiming into air. It's not such an active piece. It got its purpose. It has taken now the rook, but now I think the activity of white's pieces is simply too much to handle for black. So as I said, after the move d5, if your opponent plays e5, d takes e6, en passant bishop to e6, and then b3, don't worry so much about potential knight to e4 move. So in the game, bishop to d7, that was, as I said, prearranged. I really wanted to show you this line. So we have rook to b1. The idea is clear because first of all we have the expansion on the queen side. Our pawn on d5, first of all, it's on the queen side. That's the direction of the attack where we should coordinate the attack, and it's also a space advantage on the 5th rank. So now Stockfish has great plans with potential b4, b5 move. So knight to a6, we have b4, very important move. Knight to c7, here fire is challenging, of course, also the d5 square, and now we have d takes c6. If you try knight to d4, then the problem is that you get finally this e5 pawn breakthrough, and after potential maybe d takes c6, still this is playable, I think, because first of all the e takes d4 will happen, although you can maybe grab a piece, but now we can also attack the knight on c3. So that's why this idea to play knight to d4 immediately doesn't bring you so much. So e5 will happen, and it comes with the tempo on the knight. So that's why after the move knight to c7, d takes c6 was played by Stockfish. We have bishop to c6, which is a good choice by black. It competes here. The bishop competes, of course, with the bishop on g2. Now the white knight is a little bit stuck positionally, because if you move the knight, black would love, of course, to trade off the light square bishops and go maybe into a simplified line. But there is one problem. Even if black manages to do that, if black trades off this light square bishop, there are still these clear targets in black's position. There are these light square weaknesses. So the best piece to protect your light squares is, of course, the bishop. So even if you trade off the light square bishops, still you could face some light square problems. I'm telling you that because that will be very important in the continuation of the game. We have b5. See now, Stockfish is challenging now the bishop, and now after potential trades of bishops, we could really exploit these weaknesses that black has played here with the move f5 and also with the move d6. Now the clear target is the weak square on e6. So bishop to e4, we have rook to b3. This rook is on PCP. This rook is really crazy. You see what this rook will cause now in continuation of the game. This is really this Stockfish rook lift madness that Stockfish creates most of the times in the game. Rook to b3, we have queen to c8, and now knight takes e4. We got rid of the bishop, still continuing the game with our bishop pair, but the most important thing is we're continuing the game with the light square bishop. And now after the move knight to e4, we have knight to g5, challenging immediately. We want to open the position for the bishop. If you play now knight to c5 was played, if you take the knight, that's not good. Then this bishop comes into the game very actively. So that's why here after the move knight to g5, knight to c5. Okay, black has cemented the knight. Black has now a very powerful knight on c5. It cannot be kicked away by any pawns. So you see we don't have any more the b or d pawn in order to kick the knight. So whenever you face outposts, whenever you see that your opponent has fixed one particular piece, then it's simply time to play around that piece. Get out of the range of that piece. Don't mess up with that piece or take it out. So that are the best ways how to proceed against this knight on c5. So here rook to e3. This rook is really crazy. So this rook comes really on a weird square. It can maybe pinned with be pinned with bishop to h6. In the game bishop to f6, played by fire, and we have now h4, fixing the knight. And you don't want to give up your bishop now for the knight, because then you have light square problems, but you have also dark square problems, because the dark square bishop is, of course, your key defender in front of the king. I think in the continuation of the game, bishop to b2, queen to d4. Even if you manage to push the pawn on e5, I think then a rook sacrifice. Rook takes e5. Let's imagine the position. So the bishop is on b2, the queen is on d4, and for instance, black pushes the pawn on e5, then rook to e5, queen to e5, and then deliver checkmate here on g7. So great performance so far by Stock. h4, so you see leaving the knight a little bit here. We have rook to d8, and we have now a4, cementing the queen side. Still this knight is very well placed, attacks of course the a4, but it's really time to make progress here and open here the diagonal for a light square bishop. So h6, kicking away the knight. Black doesn't love the fact that this knight is on a very active square. Knight to h3. Now the knight can come on a very active square f4. Again, we have a weak pawn on g6. So in the game e5, we have queen to c2. Nothing has changed. And now b6. And here Stockfish pardon me, a6. And here Stockfish shows really a great positional move, b6. Simply passing through. After knight to e6, we have a bishop to b2. Waiting now this knight to come. If this wasn't played in the game, but if you play, for instance, knight to d4, we will simply take. Bishop takes d4, here e takes d4, and now rook to a3. And if we value it now, although these are opposite colored bishops, we have a light square bishop, black has a dark square bishop. Still, this activity of this light square bishop is so much better. Bishop to d5 is a possibility. You cannot push the pawn on d3 to make something happen. You lose simply a pawn. But even if you manage to do that, let's imagine black trades off somehow this pawn without losing some material. Then this bishop is aiming again into nothing. But this light square bishop, on the other hand, it creates really some madness here on the light squares. Bishop to d5 is a possibility. Now, also, a tactical threat could be h5, then splitting the pawn, g takes h5, and then creating a weakness on f5. That's also a very nice attacking idea. And also this idea is knight to f4 attacking and knight to d5. So you see how black has these light square problems. The evaluation is really better here for white in this country. So in the game after the move bishop to b2, that wasn't played as I said, but I wanted to see what happens if knight to d4 black plays. So here h5 was played, and this was even worse because now Stockfish played a5, fixing the position on the queen side, and now queen to d7. Now bishop to d5. You see we're simply attacking now the light squares. Black has really problems here. After king to h8, we have knight to h5. Again, a great move here. After bishop to g7, bishop takes e6, knight to e6, and now rook to d1. So as I said, we have now black has of course competed on the light squares, has traded off the light squares, but now after a couple of moves, you see black has now this backward pawn, which is a huge weakness, and you cannot make something happen. There are basically no good lines. Even if you trade off the knights, again we can double up and play something like bishop to a3. So you see this relation between bishops and pawns. It's always a bad thing when you first of all block out your dark square bishop. Now this d6 is really an immobile pawn. It will stay there forever, and it's simply a clear target of white. So knight to g5, we have h takes g5, still a better position for white. Of course, king to h7, and now simple idea bishop to a3. So we have e4 developing finally the bishop, but it's too late because Stockfish simply takes. We have rook to c8, and now c5, cementing on our bishop. Very nice positional play by Stockfish. We have queen to c6, and now king to d2, simply improving the position of the king. Now it's time to activate our rooks. The rook to d7, and now queen to b3. We have rook to e8, and now queen to c4. Stockfish builds the attack now very slowly. It's not rushing into anything. Here in the game, king to h8 was played. Black is basically paralyzed. Black is really desperate here. Black doesn't have any good moves. Rook to a3, king to h7 was played. Rook to a2, now with clear ideas to double up rooks here on the d file, or maybe on the c file combined with the queen. Rook to c8, and now e3, fixing the position. We have rook to a8, and now finally rook to d2. Rook from a to d8, queen to b3, rook to e8, rook to c1, king to h8, and now comes rook to h1, king to h7, and now rook to d1. Simply playing, just improving every piece on the board. Then when the position allows it, it's time to strike. So here queen to c8. Better idea is maybe finally to get the king again back, but again I don't see how black should make progress here. So as I said, after move rook to d1, queen to c8 was played, but now bishop to f4. The rook is hanging in the game. A rook to d3 was played. We have queen to f7, rook to f8. Now a very nice move, queen to c7, forcing the trades of queens. And now the good part is you should really take with the pawn, not with the bishop. It's time to create a pass pawn. B takes c7. We have rook to c8, and now rook to b1, attacking also this weakness in the game. Bishop to f8 was played, and now Stockfish simply takes another pawn. We have king to g8, and now it's game over because after rook to b8 cannot do anything. Here rook takes c7, bishop to c7, and now king to f7, simply pushing further. And after move rook to d5, it was game over. So you see how Stockfish plays this position. First chasing the light square bishop, then provoking light square weaknesses, then exploiting light square weaknesses, trading off positionally the bishop for a knight, getting into a bad bishop position. Great positional play, and in the past it seemed to me, at least, maybe I'm not correct, but it seemed to me that in these positional battles Stockfish had some troubles, but now this Stockfish 12 or this Stockfish NNUE version has improved really this positional understanding, and that's why it's so strong, and that's why, again, I'll praise it. I think Stockfish will win this TCEC Season 19. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more positional brutal games like this, check out my commented chess games played by computers. Here's the link. And if you want to see the best chess games played by humans, check out my best chess games of all time series. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best of